Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy freaking Wednesday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to go through some news and, more importantly, talk all things with Guillotine Leagues, one of the most exciting fashions of fantasy football that any of us can play. So joining me now to discuss all this on the Fantasy Life Show is Director of Guillotine Leagues over here at FantasyLife.com, Paul Charchian, my new and improved co-worker and today co-host. So Paul, how's it going, my friend?
Can we become more than just coworkers? I mean, that's so clinical. I mean, we don't have to spoon, but can we make it a little more friendly than that, Ian? Come on, man.
Fair point. Fair point. But Paul, man, we're now with Fantasy Life, for a week or two. How's it going? This
Yeah.
is it's a free space. You can hate on people if you want.
Well, it was all great until I met this jackass with spiky hair, and and all of a sudden he's just calling me coworker. Until then, it was going great. Yeah, no, it's fantastic to be part of the family. Super excited to bring Guillotine Leagues to a bigger audience. I started it 4 years ago. Now, with all the resources that Fantasy Life has got, including things like this show, we get to introduce, I think, the funnest way to play fantasy football to a much bigger audience and bring guillotine love to the masses right here.
Exciting times, everybody. We got some cool stuff going on at Fantasy Life. So strap in. Got a lot to talk about today. But first, a quick word on Fantasy Life Plus. Fantasy Life Plus, guys, our premium product over here at Fantasy Life, where again, we're just trying to make you, a scholar, a little bit smarter and maybe give you those extra tools that are separating you from being good at football and getting you over that ledge to being great. So again, all of our content, written video and all that, all still very much free. You're listening to me right now for free. But again, if you want the extra step, our draft champion tool allows you to do customizable mock drafts, Dwayne's utilization tool suite, and again, just more consensus ranks and things of that nature. Fantasy Life Plus might be the package for you. So go ahead and check it out, FantasyLife.com. And as I always say, even our tier 2 package is cheaper than a Chipotle burrito per month. So not trying to break the bank, just trying to make you a bit little smarter at fantasy football. So Fantasy Life Plus, and now some news. All right, Paul, not the most, riveting Tuesday in the fantasy football world, but we still did get a couple news items, primarily two guys that are going to be going inside the top one, maybe two rounds of your fantasy drafts, at least a little bit banged up. So not sounding the alarms here, but got to talk about him a little bit. We did have Saquon Barkley exit Eagles practice early with what seemed to be a lower back injury. We also got word that Tyreek Hill is dealing with a right hand injury, had a brace on during practice and was not seen catching passes. So hopefully we'll get more word on these issues again over the next 24 hours or so. None tentatively seem to be overly serious, but I think it's a good time, Paul, to potentially look at what would happen should these two studs miss any time. So looking first at this Eagles backfield, I mean, it's a situation where, yes, we've seen them score plenty of points over the past few years, but maybe not the most fantasy friendly offense for the running back position specifically.
Well, yeah, when your quarterback eats 15 touchdowns, that's that's going to erase a lot of rushing touchdowns from your running backs. And if Barkley does end up faltering at some point, likely injury, whatever, Kenneth Gainwell's probably next guy up. I just don't think Will Shipley's built to be any kind of workhorse. To me, feels like utility guy, special teamer. And so I assume it's boring as it is. I assume Kenneth Gainwell will be next guy up there. You mentioned it in Miami, the possibility of Tyreek Hill. This hand injury doesn't look serious. I suspect he'll be back at practice this week. But if we were to project this out, maybe, it's probably boring, but Braxton Berrios, maybe next guy. Now, Malik Washington's got a lot of steam. The rookie, the sixth rounder's got a lot of steam. Maybe we'd get a little extra time for him. But I think it'd be Berrios right now. They're all kinds of banged up there, by the way. Odell Beckham hurt. Waddle's a little banged up. Hill's banged up. I think River Craycraft's banged up.
There we go.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you're going to get to River Craycraft. That's how you know Paul the weeds with what's going on right here. But yeah, man, look, we only had a 1-game sample last year of Tyreek missing time. And
Yeah.
what happened? Well, Jalen Waddle went the hell off is what happened. 8 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown against a very good defense in the New York Jets. In December, guys, it's possible for Tua to have some good football games, even when the weather does get colder. Now, it was still in Miami. I get it. But a good note to remember when I see some people, again, freaking out about that potential later season schedule. So, again, not sounding the alarms, but as Paul said, maybe, just maybe, Kenneth Gainwell someone to look at with a very late round pick. I didn't even put these
Yeah.
Eagles running backs and anywhere near my top 3 handcuff tiers because, as Paul said, you got Jalen Hurts essentially being your goal line back. Over these past 3 seasons, Eagles running backs, they actually rank first in carries between the 2 and the 5-yard line, but 30th from the 1-yard line. So that's
How
where
about
things do tend to go to Jalen. And again, maybe Saquon is, that much better to get those extra 3 feet when it matters, relative to Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift. But yeah, for right now, keep an eye on these injuries. But I'm with Paul. Don't exactly think they're going to be anything too serious. Certainly don't need to be overly adjusting the fantasy ranks to account for them. Now, Paul, we did get some good injury news, which is always welcomed here,
Yeah.
in the dog days of the summer. But the Lions head coach Dan Campbell, who per Coach Speak, who we had on the show a couple weeks ago, is actually very trustworthy when it comes to discussing injuries. Dan Campbell basically said after this final preseason game against Pittsburgh, they do expect to have Jahmyr Gibbs, who we've definitely seen in the news and talked about, but also quietly Sam Laporta. Both guys have been dealing with hamstring injuries. They are expected to be back next week. So, Paul, we're going to get into everything with guillotine leagues and the big, serious implications of injuries in that specific form of fantasy football. But right now, do you have any reservations about taking Gibbs and or Laporta at the top of drafts?
Nope, not at all. And I love that if you're going to get the hamstring injury, and we hate the hamstring injuries, better to get it in the preseason when there's no pressure to bring somebody back too soon. Because we all know if you played fantasy for 10 minutes that the hamstring injuries re-injure frequently and aggravate. And now you have a setback, and your 3-week injury just turned into a 6-week injury because you got to redo the whole thing. But in the preseason, no pressure to get these guys on the field. Nobody comes back too soon. So not worried about Laporta. I think he's going too late in drafts. We're seeing him end of second round, beginning of third round. To me, I think he's worth more than that. I would take him sooner, in fact. And Jahmyr Gibbs going, end of first round, roughly, Ian? I don't think I would change. I don't think I'd change that either in standard formats.
I mean, last 7 or 8 years at this point, the only tight end ones in fantasy football have been Travis Kelce, like 6 freaking times, and then Mark Andrews and Sam Laporta. So already certainly in pretty darn good company. And I'm with you on Gibbs as well, someone that regularly is going off the board as RB4. And also, though, guys, a good reminder of just how much upside David Montgomery could potentially have should Gibbs miss any time. Happened in 2 instances last year, and we did see D-Monk go out there and rip off RB2 and RB5 overall finishes. So, Paul, like our main kind of split we had with these guys was from weeks 10 through the NFC Championship. And Gibbs did have the lead in overall snaps and, of course, routes. But PPR points, 16.7 for Gibbs, 13.6 for Montgomery. I think when we're looking at these Lions running backs, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool if, one of them was able to have just all the lion's share of the touches. That's what we want in Fantasyland. But over the years, man, the answer to which Lions running back to draft has more times than not just been yes.
Yes. Well, how about this? So you talked about how close, when they're on the field together, how closely both Montgomery and Gibbs scored. But there's a 4-round differential between these guys. Yeah. So if they're going to be close, and if one's more likely to miss time, it looks like it might be Gibbs. I mean, Montgomery just feels like the better value at running back 21 than paying the running back 4 price you have to pay on Gibbs. What do you think?
You're not wrong, man. And look, the RB21 still might sound a little bit expensive, but I'm pulling up our ADP tool right now, and he's even dropping like really far below that in the overall ranks as well. I mean, over at ESPN, pick 72. I mean, on Sleeper, he's picked 62. Yahoo, he's picked 50. So, like, we do see other sites have him kind of juiced up, maybe at a more appropriate price. So, good reminder, everyone, really analyze the format, the fantasy provider you're about to step into, because some of these player values can change wildly depending on the site. So again, not the most riveting news day, but certainly a couple relevant injury updates. And I do have a few more I want to hit you guys with our normal rapid fire segment. So first of all, guys, good news from Mike Tomlin concerning Jaylen Warren. Know that he is probably out this week, but not anything that's a long-term concern. Very good news for the Hartitz family's bank account. Let me tell you that. Also, Jawan Johnson has been elevated from the PUP list. He is back running routes and looking good in full pads. Doesn't seem like that, again, foot injury that a lot of people worry about is going to persist into the regular season. Alvin Kamara is returning to practice with a back injury. Jelani Woods, sadly, is going to have surgery to repair his turf toe. I'm with you, Paul. A lot of Anthony Richardson teams drafted by your boy, and I did take a lot of Jelani Woods in round 18 as well. So, man, I know you love that 10 out of 10 raw athletic score, relative athletic score, I should say, Paul. So, sucks to see with Jelani get better soon.
That's a big loss.
At least the good news with the Colts, though, Josh Downs no longer scooter bound, so we're moving up there. Giants teammates are now calling Tyron Tracy, who returned to practice, Paul Pierce, after he got carted off with the minor ankle injury, but returned pretty quickly. So that's a fantastic nickname. Pro Football Reference, get it updated. Matthew Stafford, still a little bit limited with the hamstring tightness, but he is back at practice, so good news there. In typical Deontay Johnson fashion, he limped off the practice field, but then came back shortly after to catch a pass, so that's good news. Chuba Hubbard also practicing, and Christian Kirk won't play in the final preseason game, still dealing with that calf injury. Not a big deal, but again, something to monitor. Few overall depth chart notes. Jalen Naylor has locked up the wide receiver 3 spot in Minnesota, and quote unquote hasn't been close per Warren Ludford. Todd Archer reports that Jerry Jones said Cowboys and the CD Lamb are having promising talks, whatever that means. Sam Fran and Brandon Ayuk continue to get closer to an extension. And another update that doesn't really seem like it's an update, but what else are NFL insiders going to do? Dan Campbell confirmed that Khalif Raymond is the wide receiver 3 right now, and the Pats beat is hyping up Tyquan Thornton as a starting X, presumably as long as Kendrick Bourne is going to be sidelined. So finally, guys, pretty cool feature. I mean, Paul, YouTube TV is offering Fantasy View, allows Yahoo and NFL.com users to link their fantasy teams to, key plays and just big moments. And now we're actually going to have the ability to customize the quad box, with whatever games we want. So I don't know about you, Paul, but when I'm chilling on Sundays, man, I got the red zone on one big TV and I got the quad backs on the other TV. What's your, premium, just ultimate kind of setup for Sundays?
I've got 2 TVs right next to each other, and I've got 4 and 4. I got quad and quad. Now, frustratingly, a lot of Sundays there's 9 or 10 games, so then I still end up missing parts of one game. I got to go, find that later. But I love the adrenaline of the 8 games and just your eyes just nonstop back and forth. Oh, I love that. And the quad box. I want to believe, Ian, that my bitching single-handedly moved YouTube TV to finally give us the customizable quad box. That's all I ever wanted. Last year we had a choice of 10 different boxes, and they would always have 1 or 2 teams that was on every single configuration. So it'd be just let me pick my boxes, and they did it finally, and I'm super excited about that. Thank you, YouTube TV.
Thank you for your service, Paul, and getting that changed for all of us.
Complaining
out there,
is that's my core specialty.
Well, the fantasy community thanks you for your service. So good stuff there, guys. And now we're going to talk some Guillotine Leagues right after a quick word on DraftKings. Hey everyone, with the football season kicking off, it is the perfect time to dive into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet just $5 will instantly get $250 back in bonus bets, plus get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. And guys, personally, I have gotten a look at the NFL Plus Premium product, and it is absolutely fantastic. Some of the new features with the ability to filter plays in all 22 view in particular, so cool for football fans of, again, all shapes and sizes. So that is something we can all celebrate. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. Remember, the crown is yours, and stay in on the action and use your $250 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns, but if sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager and get $250 back in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. All right, Paul, it is guillotine season here at Fantasy Life on the Fantasy Life show. And let's make it simple, man. In your own words, what even is a guillotine fantasy football league?
All right, it's a standard season-long league, but everything after that changes. First, we play with up to 18 teams because there's 18 weeks in the season. No head-to-head, Ian. Instead, every week, the low-scoring team gets chopped from the league completely, and their roster goes to the waiver wire, where the rest of us are bidding to build superstar rosters. If you can survive, just not finish last by October, November, you've got a crazy superstar laden rosters. All you have to do is not finish last. Ian, can you not finish last any week of the season? Can you do it?
I guess we're going to find out, because I know I'm in a couple of these guillotine leagues with you this year,
Yeah,
Paul. And
baby.
again, you have so much content on FantasyLife.com that I was going through last evening, and I'd invite everyone else to do so. Again, all free and help get you ready. But some of the points you made, man, I thought were great. Where, again, your quote, in a guillotine league, your season can end any week. You're going to experience playoff level anxiety each and every week
Yes.
out there. And you mentioned how week one, again, there's 18 teams, only one is losing. You have a 94.4% of survival, but by week
Right.
17, that's down to 50%. So it is this weird phenomenon where you're probably okay. You have a 50% or better chance of surviving each and every week. But man, I mean, I already get the Monday Night Football scaries in my, redraft league, just trying to get the W. I'm imagining, man, things are turned up quite a few notches when it's literally difference of your season ending or getting to advance.
Monday night in a guillotine league is amazing for everybody. If your butt is on the line, I don't know whatever. I'm not sure what we can exactly say. If your season is on the line, Ian, obviously you're watching very closely, right? You need your tight end. God forbid, Jelani Woods, right? Our beloved Jelani Woods. I need 3 catches for 50 yards from Jelani Woods on Monday night, or I'm getting chopped and my season's over. That's obviously a big deal. But even if you're safe on a Monday night, you know what you're doing, Ian. You are like a vulture circling over the soon-to-be corpses in your league. And you're looking at the rosters, and I'm looking at Ian's team, and I'm like, oh, Ian might get knocked out. He's got Christian McCaffrey. Oh, baby, here we go. And you start rooting for good teams to get chopped. So let's play this Christian McCaffrey out. Let's say it's week one. You've got the team with Christian McCaffrey gets chopped. Maybe McCaffrey plays great, but the rest of the team flops, and that team gets chopped. Ian, you've got $1,000 of fab to last you the rest of the season. And here comes Christian McCaffrey on the waiver wire in week one. How much you laying down?
I was going to ask you that question, Paul, because for me, it seems like, man, that's the 101 guy. But on the other side of things, I mean, yes, Christian McCaffrey, everyone's consensus RB1 for a reason. But at the same time, man, if you can survive a couple of weeks, we're going to see Breece Hall and Bijan out there as well soon enough. So again, in a redraft league, if one of your idiot friends gets too drunk and drops Christian McCaffrey, we're using 100% every single dollar we got. I'm trying to trade for more fab. But for someone like McCaffrey or CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson, like a true round one pick, what would you recommend the fab for like an early season waiver edition?
Well, the key to the early season fab is don't spend your fab, because all the newbies are going to be like, oh my God, it's Christian McCaffrey on the waiver wire, $985. And those guys, and sure, you pick up Christian McCaffrey, you pick up CeeDee Lamb, and those guys, they'll keep you afloat for a few weeks. But the problem is into October, you're sitting on $50. Meanwhile, the rest of us have got $1,000 or most of our money left, $900. And even better teams are getting chopped every week of the season. And remember, Christian McCaffrey could get chopped 4 times in a season. It's possible. Even Christian McCaffrey, pick a player. So this is not your only chance to get Christian McCaffrey, but the newbies are going to get it confused and they're going to overspend early. We are not. We're going to show a little discipline, Ian.
And again, guys, you're starting off 18 freaking teams out here. So the rosters won't be looking all that great, but just imagine by the time you get to week 12, week 13, as it continues to dwindle down, as Paul notes, benching guys like Tyreek Hill might be surreal, but it actually can happen late in a guillotine league season. And again, can only imagine just the pressure you're putting on yourself when you're benching someone like Tyreek Hill when that goes wrong. Whole new level of dread here only in guillotine league. So with that, Paul, let's get into it, man. You have, your draft day mistakes that again, everyone can find on FantasyLife.com, but we're going to go through a few of them now. So your number one draft day mistake is actually people drafting for upside, which honestly, man, feels sacrilegious to say because we're always chasing upside in fantasy football. Right. But, as you quoted, you want to draft a full roster of boring, consistent players. Elaborate on that.
That's right. So in a guillotine format where we're just playing to not finish last, we don't want players that have a lot of variance to them. We are not trying to target upside. In a traditional league, to be the best team out of 12, I need a bunch of my takes to hit. I need drafting Zamir White in the 5th round and he ends up leading the NFL in carries, which maybe he'll do. Whatever. I need to take some big swings and have them pan out to be the best of 12. But in a Guillotine League, I'm just looking to finish 17th out of 18th in week 1, 16th out of 17th in week 2. I'm looking for consistent, boring players. And if you want an emblematic player of that, Kirk Cousins. Touchdown passes in 54 of his last 55 games. He's finished his QB 20 or better in 45 of his last 55 games. Kirk Cousins, the archetype for boring, safe, modest upside guys that will keep you from getting chopped. And that's the kind of guy that we're really targeting here, not the big home run hitters that can be great in best ball, can be great in other formats, but also give you dud games. We're trying to avoid dud games.
Volume. Chase that more than ever. And again, some of the other guys you mentioned, Evan Ingram, Jacoby Myers, maybe not the premier targets that we're used to seeing in fantasy football, but guess what? Guillotine Leagues isn't what you're used to seeing in fantasy football in the first place. So again, not drafting for upside. Look, I'm sure, Paul, that we want to ideally combine the two, have that nice floor and the higher ceiling. But is there something, because again, you obviously do plenty of regular fantasy drafts as well.
Yep.
I mean, when you are trying to just get that safer floor, what have you kind of found the year-to-year consistency to be? Because personally, like to me, I would expect most of the highly ranked players in redraft to also, have a fairly high correlation with guillotine ranks.
Well, I think the big difference here, we're really looking for dependable volume as much as anything else. You touched on volume just a moment ago, Ian. For guillotine, we just want people who are going to get the ball in their hands, and we want to avoid people that, as one area of real concern, receivers who are playing behind a target hog, like Jalen Waddle. You look at Tyreek Hill, 170 and 171 targets in his 2 seasons in Miami. That just means automatically that Jalen Waddle is going to have some 3-target games, 4-target games, 5-target games that turn into 2, 3, 4 catch games. And now you're in trouble. Now, if you can survive just Jalen Waddle doing that, but you may not be able to survive 3 guys that do that in the same week. And now you have the recipe for a chopping. So we're looking for dependable volume. We're looking for situations for players that are not going to fail if game script goes the wrong way. If you can avoid injury concerns, that's obviously big too. And maybe we talk more about that later as well. But yeah, we're just looking for guys that are dependable week in, week out grinders, and volume is the single best indicator.
So I'm looking at, again, just some of the regular ADP right now. And to me, guys like Michael Pittman, Malik Neighbors, maybe they're standing out a bit more because, again, as much as I might prefer a Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith over the course of a 17-game season, if I'm being forced to ask who has the best chance to just get 8 targets each week in and week out, I do think some of those, more number 1 wide receivers and the offenses with just less overall competition, good way to go about that. So good stuff, Paul. And again, not overly drafting for upside at the top of your Guillotine League drafts. Now, your second point is, again, something that's going to be a bit of a surprise to more traditional fantasy players. We don't really want rookies. Now, as I always say, don't hate the player, hate the ADP. So I'm sure all these guys are fine at the right cost. But man, you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs and Dalton Kincaid, who had great overall seasons last year. But if you did take them in a Guillotine League, Paul, you might have not been alive long enough to actually see them start to flourish during the second half.
Yeah, this is the problem with rookies, is even when a rookie has a good overall season, almost always the beginning of the season is pretty rough. And even if you go to Justin Jefferson, the best receiver going in the game right now, his first 5 games of his rookie career were very, very up and down. You could have got chopped through that. Last year, Jahmyr Gibbs was great, but he was a guillotine assassin for his first 2 months, and that was a real problem. After that point, he got rolling. He was very, very safe. Most rookies simply take time, and a lot of rookies don't pan out at all. I mean, you drafted Quentin Johnston, right? You were dead. Jonathan Mingo, he killed you. There's a lot of danger. I love you mentioned Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors looks like the focal point of the passing offense for the Giants, but will he be in September? I'm just trying to stay alive, Ian, for September, because your outlook in guillotine is 3 or 4 weeks. That's it. You don't care what's past that. And the reason you don't, Ian, is because your roster is always changing about the players on my roster right now for October, November, December, because my roster is going to change in Guillotine Leagues, because when you get cut, I'm going to go get some of your players. My roster is going to keep improving.
And we're always going to have chances throughout the year to get these guys time and time again on a waiver wire that I imagine must look absolutely ridiculous by the time the second half of the season comes along. So again, as much as in traditional redraft, mode, we're looking at some of these rookies, handcuff running back types in the later rounds. I mean, we really can't be looking ahead into the fantasy playoffs, into the second half of the year.
Right.
Most important week is truly the next one, because again, you're freaking dead. Otherwise, getting your head cut off in terms of a fantasy league is concerned. So again, not overly concerned about the rookies, because it might not have the sort of roles in September that we need to survive. Now, Paul, again, getting to your draft day mistake number 4, we don't want runners who cannot catch. And I think people are used to, looking at running backs who, they can, hopefully we want all the touches we can get. So hopefully our running backs are also catching the football. But talk about how important this is, and maybe how that, again, spruces up someone like a Jaleel McLaughlin, for example, who maybe doesn't have the highest best case ceiling, but again, we're not necessarily chasing that. We'll take that safe floor.
We'll take the safe floor. PPR, if we play at guillotineleagues.com, we play full PPR. We're looking for runners who give me the safety of 4 catches and 50 receiving yards, my 9 PPR points, bang, right there through the air. And then my rushing's almost gravy on top of that. So we're looking for guys, runners who can catch. Those Austin Eckler is going to be a really, really nice a guillotine runner for you. And the opposite of that are guys like Brian Robinson or Devin Singletary. These are runners who don't catch. They're not going to give you that safe floor, PPR floor. And when they don't put together a good rushing game, when they don't score touchdowns, by the way, Brian Robinson just hates the end zone. When they don't score rushing touchdowns, now we're really sitting on we need yards. So even if they turn in, let's stay with Brian Robinson for a second, Ian. If he doesn't catch, he's going to chip in like 1 catch a game. Then if he has a 55-yard rushing game, which Brian Robinson's fully capable of, and no touchdown, that's a recipe for a chopping. You're looking at a 6-7 point game, and that's how you get chopped. These are super dangerous guys. As your last flex, okay, Devin Singletary is my last flex. I can live with that early in the season, and I'll replace him in time. But at the start of a season, as somebody that I need, I don't want runners who can't catch and are monodimensional, and especially the ones who can't reliably score touchdowns.
And again, we already have our questions about Robinson and obviously Devin Singletary just as pure pass catchers in their own right. Not to mention, both guys are now going to be playing with, highly kind of rushing heavy dual threat quarterbacks in Daniel Jones and Jaden Daniels. And historically, guys, they start feeling pressure. They're taking off and scrambling instead of checking it down. So I always make the jokes on, Monday or Tuesday, because we'll have some awesome rush attempt. Derrick Henry breaks 6 tackles and chugs along, for this 14-yard gain. And that's 1.4 PPR points. Then you'll see a running back catch a 4-yard pass and just get blasted. And that's also 1.4 PPR points. So again, as much as I do think fantasy football generally does a good job reflecting real life goodness as well, doesn't always. And when we do see the bigger examples of it not doing so, PPR, again, with some of those short checkdowns, really do stand out. So again, we do not want runners who don't catch. Now, Paul, your draft day mistake number 6, the injured, infirmed, and imbecilic. I think I got that word right. Talk a little bit more about, again, some of the concerns with drafting guys who are actively banged up. And this is one thing I also just want to elaborate on. Big difference between considering someone injury prone and someone actively being already injured.
Yeah, great point. And again, we're looking at our vision in Guillotine Leagues is only 3 or 4 weeks. So I can't wait out TJ Hawkinson, Nick Chubb. I mean, great players. Players I'd like to have later in the season. I can't wait to find out when they're coming back to a full workhorse status like they normally were. Those are guys that are going to use up a roster spot that I need to stay alive in September. Can't trust Nick Chubb, TJ Hawkinson. There are others that in just hope that they come back. Can't do it. Then we look at the imbecilic. Guys that could be suspended. Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison. Come on. And if the suspensions are going to come down before the season starts, and maybe they do, They would probably have to serve those suspensions in September, right at the beginning of the season. Now, as we get closer to the beginning of the season, if these guys don't get suspended, then maybe that doesn't matter as much, but there's still a lot of risk with those. If you have players that have a certain amount of tumult with them, Brandon Ayuk's contract situation, if you believe that he's going to get shipped off somewhere else, and then Pittsburgh's going to have to take time to onboard him, whatever, also super dangerous. So you have to be careful with those kinds of players, the injured, the infirmed, the imbecilic. Those are all players that they just don't match the safety that you have to stay alive in your guillotine leagues.
And again, it feels weird for me to hear that because we're used to embracing that uncertainty and chasing that upside because we're trying to be first out of 12 or however many people, we're playing with out here. But as Paul said, we don't care about being first. We just want to be second to last each and every week. I mean, imagine again, if you just had your last place punishment going on each and every week. That's basically what we're working with here with Guillotine League. So again, make sure you check out Paul's draft day mistakes article over on FantasyLife.com. And that's just the beginning, guys. I mean, we're going to go through his safest and riskiest picks in the first, 5 rounds or so in a second. But he's got that, fab advice, so much more good stuff only at FantasyLife.com. But before we get to that, guys, it is time to pay some homage. Guys, I freaking love Homage. It is a fantastic clothing wear provider, and Paul and I happen to be rocking some shirts right now. I got CJ Stroud in an NFL Blitz shirt that everyone can see in the YouTube audience, and Paul is wearing an objectively cooler straight cash homie Randy Moss shirt. And just so everyone knows, I literally came to my computer, this morning before we got on, and I was wearing the exact same shirt that Paul had. So great minds think alike, my friend. And Paul, no, we're going to pay some homage, talk about Randy Moss, and just again how great of a freaking player this dude has been.
I want to go back to Randy Moss's rookie year. I'm in Minnesota. I don't know if you know that, Ian. So I'm a Twin Cities guy. Back then, so his rookie year, it's 1997. At that point, I'm 5 years into my fantasy football career. I'm with him. I started a magazine called Fantasy Football Weekly, and we had an event called the Fantasy Football Expo. We would bring in Chris Mortensen. It was held in his rookie year. It was held in the Metrodome, and it was panels, and it was booths, and it was really cool. We brought in Randy Moss, and this is in the preseason of his rookie year, and Robert Smith and offensive coordinator Brian Billick into the Fantasy Football Expo. Now, he had blown up in the preseason, Randy Moss had. And so I had made some last-minute adjustments in my wide receiver rankings for Randy Moss. This was at a time when rookie receivers almost never went crazy in their rookie year back then, but Moss was crushing training camp. So I've got an August draft issue, and I bumped him up from wide receiver 60 to wide receiver 38, which was a big move for a rookie receiver at the time. So Randy shows up, Robert Smith's there, Brian Billick's there, and my magazine is there, and he sits down, and we're doing a little panel, and he's talking. We're taking questions from the audience, and he starts flipping through my magazine, and Randy Moss finds his ranking. And he gets my magazine out. He finds his ranking, and he reads his write-up on it, and he turns to me, he goes, 48? Or 30, whatever it was, 38. Yeah, that's pretty high for a rookie. And he just shakes his head. And of course, he went off to have a historic rookie year, and he was totally right. Little did we know that would be the Vikings team that would go on to set the record for the most points scored in the history of the league, the 97 Vikings. So there's my Randy Moss story for you. We're paying homage.
Dude, that is ridiculous. Again, it's one of those things where I don't think the NFL, players necessarily realize the ADP stuff. So I had a situation, I forget what player it was, but tweeted something, and a player was offended where I had him ranked, even if it was, exactly where he was going with ADP. So even though you were actually high on Randy freaking Moss, he maybe didn't actually realize that. But I have a feeling, knowing Randy, Paul, unless you had him as wide receiver 1 overall, probably wasn't going to be happy.
That's right. There was no right answer.
Oh man, but straight cash homie, I freaking love that shirt. And again, so many different options over at Homage, but that is one of the best ones. And again, I got CJ Stroud in his NFL Blitz style get up. I got a Josh Allen one as well. But as a native Columbus, Ohioan, as much as I want to rock my Buckeye stuff all day, every day, got to show a little love to, again, one of the best quarterbacks that we've seen come out of Ohio State. We can probably already say ever, guys, at this point. I mean, I know Bama fans love to give Jalen Hurts and claim him as their own. So I try to push that same sentiment with Joe Burrow coming out of Ohio State. But I get it. I'm kind of being a bit of a jack off. You're trying to use that. So really looking back, as much as Ohio State has produced these, really good collegiate quarterbacks, Braxton Miller, Terrell Pryor, JT Barrett, Cardale Jones out there winning natties. I mean, it has been basically forever since we've seen one come into the NFL and put up the sort of numbers that we saw Stroud do as a freaking rookie out there. So really just want to go back to, again, that week 9 breakout performance against the Buccaneers, because things weren't going incredible for CJ Stroud. Like, he had some good moments, certainly a promising start. But before week 9, I mean, he had just had 140 scoreless yards against the Panthers. He threw for under 200 and 250 yards against the Saints and Falcons. And then all of a sudden, him and Baker Mayfield had one of the best games of the year that culminated in that game-winning touchdown to Tank Dell. 470 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air for CJ Stroud. And you just saw that swagger, man. The crossing the arms after the touchdown and really just putting the football wherever he wanted to on the field. So after that, really just seemed like this offense was a force to be reckoned with, even though Tank Dell was unfortunately lost for the season soon thereafter. I mean, Paul, it's one of those things where we look at the Texans, and in hindsight, it's a lot easier to say, oh, look at these great weapons that Stroud had. But the fact that, again, really, Nico was a little bit banged up down the stretch as well. And he was really the only guy that was consistently balling throughout most of the season. Noah Brown was putting up big time numbers thanks in large part to what Stroud was doing under center. So that's why, again, now with Nico, a healthy Tank Dell, and oh yeah, Stephon freaking Diggs out there, the ceiling truly is the roof for CJ Stroud ahead of 2024. And I know I speak for all of us Columbus, Ohio natives when I say we wish him the best of luck. So again, guys, paying homage, check out homage.com, and that is spelled HOMAGE, homage.com/fantasy to reveal their top ranked officially licensed player tees so you can rep your fantasy team with pride. Be sure to use promo code LIFE for an exclusive discount for Fantasy Life listeners. Pay homage. Why not? It's a great day to be great after all. And with that, Paul, let's get into the safest and riskiest picks in the first 5 rounds of Guillotine drafts. Again, guys, we've gone through some of the good, to-dos and not to-dos, do's and don'ts, I should probably say, in Guillotine drafts. And Paul, and one of the things you had in your article, and we don't need to go through all 8 of these, but these are the 8 traits that you are kind of looking for and your reasons, I guess, for preferring and not preferring players. Proven reliability, but low variance, high weekly floor, late bye weeks, which is a great call out. We do not want to be dealing with, week 5, week 6 stuff. An easy starting schedule when possible. We want guys to be healthy, less competition for playing time and scoring opportunities, not touchdown dependent, again, just chasing that volume. And also the veterans, again, trying to avoid the rookies who, even if they are going to have a great season eventually, maybe not in September. So with all that in mind, Paul, let's get into your safest and riskiest picks. In round 1, a pair of Detroit Lions. Your safe pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown, our one true sun god, Matthew Berry's reigning ride or die. By the way, Matthew releasing his new ride or die 3 p.m. today over at Roto.
All right.
Make sure you guys check that out. That's going to be a fun one. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, very much safe. But on the other side of things, Paul, Jahmyr Gibbs, a bit risky. Now, we talked about it, the injury, not of major concern, but you know what? Even if it's going to cause a little bit of a slow start for Gibbs, again, that could be the difference between us, existing or just getting our freaking fantasy team's head cut off early on in a Guillotine League.
Well, let's talk through Amon-Ra St. Brown. Top 5 in targets and receptions last year. He had double-digit fantasy points in 16 of 17 games last season. I mean, it's the epitome of consistency. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god. Only downside for all Lions, a week 5 bye. That's the earliest possible bye. And when you're in an 18-team league, your roster's pretty thin. So that early bye really does hurt. You're not able to just automatically inject somebody really good into that spot. But you know it's coming, and good players are going to be on the waiver wire, so you can overcome it. For Jahmyr Gibbs, some games, David Montgomery's just going to have the hot hand, or he's going to take 2 or 3 goal line touchdowns, and the next thing you know, Jahmyr Gibbs just doesn't have the big statistical game. Still like him, and there's still a scenario where I take Jahmyr Gibbs, but not in the first round. So, yeah, we're going to show a little more caution on him. First round pick of a Guillotine League, I want somebody who's the focal point of their offense. Jahmyr Gibbs is a great player who shares a lot in Detroit.
And as much as I know people love kind of the early career Alvin Kamara, Jameer Gibbs comp, they're both explosive, tackle breaking players. They got the dreads. They look cool. I mean, I get
Yeah.
it, guys. And Gibbs is fantastic, but he's not the same player as Kamara when it comes to that receiving upside. I'm not saying he couldn't improve, but seriously, last year, Jameer Gibbs had 316 receiving yards on 52 receptions. Ezekiel Elliott had 313 receiving yards on 51 receptions. So
Yeah.
again, I'm not trying to say Zeke is better than Gibbs. No, for the love of God, he is not. But again, Gibbs, someone that is living a bit more, I think, getting more high-end production on the ground than people might expect, makes him to be, again, just a slightly more risky pick over there in guillotine leagues. Meanwhile,
Yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, like if we had to say what wide receivers have the best, the highest chance of getting, 150 plus targets, Sun God's certainly going to be, towards the top of that list. So good stuff there, Paul. Now, as we get into round two, your safe pick, and remember, guys, 18 teams going into a lot of these
Yes.
guillotine leagues. So round two is not, players 13 through 15. We're talking, into the 20s and even 30s now. So your safe pick is perennial stud Buccaneers wide receiver one, Mike Evans. Meanwhile, a bit riskier is, as we've seen over the years, not exactly the most prominent pass catcher. Now on the Ravens, one Derrick Henry.
Yeah. All right. Let's start with Mike Evans. And for this exercise, I use the middle of each of these rounds. So I couldn't just go like, hey, first round, Christian McCaffrey. That's really easy. So we're going the middle of for each of these rounds. Mike Evans is going the middle of round two. The Cal Ripken of wideouts. He's played 161 of 170 possible career games. Plays hurt all the time and shows up. Double-digit fantasy points last year in 15 of 17 games. We love that for Mike Evans. Then the more dangerous play is Derrick Henry. We love the upgraded offensive line in Baltimore. We love the presumed running back usage he's going to get there. But Henry is the epitome of touchdown-dependent players because he does not catch. When he does not score a touchdown, Henry's average game last year, actually the last 2 years, 55 rushing yards, 16 receiving yards. That's 9 fantasy points, and that's a recipe for getting chopped. Too much touchdown dependency with Derrick Henry for the guillotine format specifically.
And looking at Henry, yes, that did come in Tennessee. We expect him to have more success on the ground in Baltimore. But honestly, like he's had some okay receiving production in more recent years. Tajay Spears took away a lot of that last year. But 2022, it kind of saved him because we were seeing, a bit of a drop off in his rushing efficiency. And yes, the yards per carry should go up in Baltimore, but we're not going to see quite as many targets. And again, some of even the goal line looks could go down because Lamar Jackson is that good in his own right. So great offense in Baltimore. No one's debating that. But if you look at the expected fantasy points per game for their team's running backs, I mean, over the last 2 years, the Ravens and Eagles ranked 27th and 28th, despite having top 8 actual real life scoring offenses. So Derrick Henry, great addition for the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe a great addition for your real life fantasy league. Maybe not so much in our guillotine league format. So again, safe Mike Evans in round 2, a little bit riskier with Derrick Henry. Moving on to round 3, Paul, our safe pick is, Taylor Swift's lovely boyfriend, Travis Kelce, someone that, again, if you want to talk about pure targets, has as high of a ceiling at the position as anybody else out there. Meanwhile, a bit riskier is Bengals overqualified, but still a fact, wide receiver 2, T. Higgins. So talk a little bit about Kelce and Mr. T. Higgins.
Well, first of all, I always prioritize the tight end position. I shouldn't tell you this. You're like on the clock in our mutual draft right now. I always prioritize the tight end position. And this season, we've got a deeper pool of tight ends because we're really optimistic about the influx of young talent at the position. It feels deeper at tight end than it has in many, many years. We've got what we expect is a breakout season coming for Dalton Kincaid. Trey McBride had his last year. Kyle Pitts should be rejuvenated. So there's a lot of reasons to feel like you can wait on tight end, but your guillotine league is 18 teams. There aren't 18 good tight ends. I'm not going to war every week with Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet. I can tell you that much. We're taking Travis Kelce. Now, did we see the start of a drop-off last year? Well, probably. He did not score between week 11 and week 18 of the regular season. He ended up with a nice playoff run, and maybe they were just saving him. So a little bit of concern. I'd rather have Sam Laporta, but still, I want a surefire tight end. Travis Kelce available in the middle of the 3rd round. We'll take him. The guy I'm avoiding is T. Higgins. We talked earlier. I don't like to have the second receiver behind a target hog. Jamar Chase chewed up 145 targets last year. That really caps Higgins' floor and ceiling. Really, Higgins missed 5 games last year with injury. he suffered 6 disastrously dud games where he had 6.6 PPR fantasy points or less.
Ooh.
So 5 games and then 6 other bad games. That's 11. That's 11 games where T. Higgins is hurting your team. So I can't do it. Jamar Chase's holdout's going to get settled. This thing's going to be, in all probability. And T. Higgins is going to resume his role as being really the Robin to Batman there. I'm worried about him.
And I mean, a little bit anecdotal, but when you look at Higgins, what didn't happen so much last year, but I think it was 2022, where we had several games where the Bengals are just play every injury so close to the vest that we had the 1 to 5 snap games where Higgins comes in questionable, and then all of a sudden he's active on an emergency only basis. So again, I'm not saying that means you can't draft Higgins at all, but enough of a tiebreaker between him and maybe someone like Michael Pittman, where again, there's a bit more confidence in their week to week target floor. Going to be tough for anyone playing behind Jamar Chase to keep that going. So again, round 3, safer Travis Kelce, a little bit riskier T. Higgins, and great call out, Paul, just on, again, really prioritizing tight end when you can, because I'm with you, man. If I have Cole Kmet in that tight end 1 slot by the time week 1 comes along, no one to blame but the man in the mirror over there. So moving on to round 4, safe pick is Bills. Fairly undisputed RB1, as Dwayne McFarland and myself were talking about on Monday. He is your safe pick. A little bit riskier is Rashee Rice, who right now looks good, not suspended for the time being, but let's face it, I am not a lawyer. I don't think that's completely finalized just yet. So talk about James Cook and Rashee Rice.
All right. First of all, I'm a little more optimistic about James Cook than a lot of other people because this team has got a dearth. They got all those targets, right? The 317 vacated targets in Buffalo. I believe James Cook is going to set career highs in receptions, targets, and I like that part of it. And the other thing, quietly, last year, Latavius Murray had 12 goal line carries.
Yeah.
WTF. Okay, where are those going to go? Can James Cook get most of those, please? I mean, I think we're going to have career highs in touchdowns, which would be fantastic. Sure, Josh Allen's going to steal some of the, the touchdowns from the 1 and the 2, but I think we've got some opportunities here for James Cook to be better. He finished with just 4 dud games last year for James Cook. And again, I think the role expands. So I like James Cook in the 4th round of our 18-team Guillotine League draft. Rashee Rice has got concerned. So we mentioned earlier, we're nervous about anybody who could be suspended, especially if it's going to be the start of the season when we need them most in Guillotine. And then, you add in Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy. Those guys look like they're going to eat up a fair number of targets. And then also the Chiefs have got a week 6 bye, and really nervous about players with the early bye. As I mentioned, we're trying to get through the first part of the season intact so we can assemble our great roster. Those early buys hurt a lot.
And as much as I do think that Rashee Rice can be a great pick in traditional redraft leagues, I mean, it's possible that we do see him working as the de facto number 2 behind Travis Kelce. And when you do look at that kind of wide receiver 30 range, there are guys like Amari Cooper, like Terry McLaurin, who, again, maybe not in quite as much of a prolific offense as what Patrick Mahomes and company are dealing with. But again, week to week targets, I think you could make an argument that those guys have a bit safer floor when it comes to that, which again, guys, is what we are chasing over here in Guillotine Land. So great stuff, Paul. Now, as we move on to round 5, and remember, round 5 in Guillotine Leagues, we're now talking, pick 75, pick 80 and beyond there. So your safe pick is an RB1, maybe not in the sexiest offense, but Zamir White certainly projected for quite a few touches, even if the scoring opportunities could be a bit few and far between. Meanwhile, the riskier pick is rookie. There it is. Wide receiver for the Bills, Keon Coleman, who again has had some, solid underlying utilization in the preseason. But at the same time, I think anyone who says they know exactly how this Bills, passing game pecking order is going to break down, don't want to call him a liar, Paul. But again, it's a risky situation that we don't know a ton about at the moment.
Right. And in Guillotine League, we're trying to avoid risk. It's just so pivotal. Zamir White feels relatively low risk for somebody who we don't know a lot about. We saw the 4 starts last year, but what we loved, Antonio Pierce giving him the ball 17 times, 22 times, 20 times, and 25 times. That is reliable, we think, dependable volume coming this season. Alexander Madison is not a threat. He's just not a special back. And so even though I don't think Zamir White's going to catch as much as I'd like, and earlier we talked about we really prefer to have our running backs who can also catch, hey, look, it's round 5. I'm looking for somebody who's going to have the ball in his hands 20 times. So we'll take Zamir White here, and we're going to avoid in round 5 Keon Coleman. Again, might turn out to be great, and we do love the fact that there's all the vacated targets, but how long does it take Keon Coleman to get up to speed? Is he going to be a reliable fantasy producer in September, or can I just wait for him to get chopped once, twice in September and October, and I could go pick him up in November when a lot of rookies really start to acclimate to the NFL? That seems like a better plan for Keon Coleman where he is going right now, middle of round 5 of your Guillotine League draft.
And with Keon, I think it's worth mentioning because I've seen the 100% route rate with the starters in the preseason and everything. But week 1 came with Mac Hollins sideline, and then week 2 came with Curtis Samuel sideline. So I do think there's a chance that if we have all 4 of them healthy, I mean, Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, obviously very different sorts of players compared to Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman. So there's a chance that, unfortunately, early on, I think we see Hollins eating into a bit more of Keon's work than fantasy managers would prefer, which, hey, in a redraft league, that's fine. Keon's going to win out, before too long. I'm not worried about that. But when week 1 is all that really matters here, Paul, it can be a problem in a hurry. So additionally, Zamir White, not someone I've been drafting much in redraft land. But hey, when we are forced to start looking at guys in that range of the draft, all of a sudden, dead zone running backs going this late in a fantasy league that is, again, just chasing that pure volume, you can do a lot worse. So I know everyone loves to say, oh, yeah, just draft, good players and good offenses with good volume. And it's like, yeah, guess what? There's not that many of those players around, and they're gone pretty early in drafts. So great stuff, Paul. Again, everyone can find this work over at FantasyLife.com. And just to round things out, again, wanted to shout out 2 tips that you give, just overall. Just stay alive. You bring up in the article, you can finish second to last each and every week and come away with a championship. And then number 2, focus on the present. So again, 18 team drafts, your team is probably going to suck, but as you bring up, Paul, actually no data shows any correlation between draft spot and win probability. So any final notes, again, just on overall guillotine goodness, and then also let the people know where they can go play.
You can play with friends for free at guillotineleagues.com, the brand new Guillotine Leagues app. You don't have to have 18 players. You can play with less than that if you play with 14. Your season will just end after week 13. You'll have 1 person left. That's week 14. Play a shadow league with your traditional league. Take all the same people in your regular league that you love. Do a shadow league for a Guillotine League at the same time with the same people you already love. Super fun. Lots of ways to play, and private leagues are totally free at guillotineleagues.com.
Love that call out. Again, it's a completely different way of doing it, guys. Just try it out, because if you're worried, to me personally, one of the more annoying things in fantasy is when you draft that terrible team, maybe you don't have a last place punishment, and just half the league is kind of tuned out by the time week 8 comes along because you're dead in the water. Guess what? You're dead in the water in guillotine leagues. Like you're physically dead. The season is over for you. No more need to worry about it. So it's this thing where, again, if you are committing more time to it, guess what? Your team's doing good, which accordingly makes it more fun. So great stuff, Paul, and great stuff to you listening out there. We'll be back again tomorrow, as we are every weekday, with another edition of the Fantasy Life Show. Dwayne McFarland and myself going through some of the best values, all that and so much more. So for Paul, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.